All right, we are live. And this morning we get to have Darren back. Thank you so much for coming back on, Darren. We had some great feedback about your first session, just really breaking down and making not only fitness and movement sound easy, but breaking down some really big concepts in nutrition and making that into a everyday life goal, not just a short-term goal. I love that you did a 12-year goal, for example. So we've had some great feedback about that. And I'm sure you guys will love this session because a lot of you guys have been either training with myself or Darren already, but we've gone over some basics of strength training when we're doing our workouts and our sessions. But in this session, you'll really get to take away some, I'm sure, some techniques that you'll be able to use in your own sessions as well. And yeah, like a master's in sports science, no one better to learn from. So thank you, Darren, again for joining us. Any questions, drop them in the chat below, and I'll be monitoring Facebook as we go, as well as the chat over here, and we can cover them at the end. Take it away. Thanks again for joining us, Darren, and your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. As a very scrawny kid in high school, and we're talking scrawny. I was, to put it in context, first year of high school, I weighed 35 kilos. So it was, and I did not grow until I was 16, and that was in combination with the first gym membership that I ever got. So it was a big one. It was kind of like that classic sort of bullied kid movie, finally sorting himself out. And so yeah, there's a lot of history / baggage there. But I tell you what, I can still look back and say that I wish I had done things a little differently, and the different means simpler. So that's what I want to try to get across to you guys today with regards to strength training. A big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is through the first job I had in a gym, and I would look out there and wander around the gym floor and see the confusion and I dare say desperation and anxiety amongst people, not to pick on the ladies, but particularly the ladies, and that's probably the guys' fault. It's a horrible testosterone fueled place right in the gym. And I just was sort of, I was like, showing my age here, that scene in Waynesville where I kind of vowed not to get a guitar, but that I would try to change the industry and make it okay to do strength training, mainly for women. Yeah, I like to think I've made a small dent in it with my gym here, but that's what I'm talking about, is simple, effective ways to incorporate strength training into your fitness. And we talked about that on Tuesday, if you tuned in or you saw the replay. That I was somewhat biased to strength training. I really do think it's important. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Again, we'll probably create more questions than we answer. That's the nature of this business. This topic, fire them through to Megan and myself, and we'll get them answered. So let me do the little sharesy. I need to grab the share thing back from you, I think. There you go. All right, go. Oh. See if that works. Okay.
Perfect. Got it.
All right. So strength training or resistance training for beginners, but hopefully if you've got some experience, you'll still glean a little bit of knowledge from this. As I said, I am, and the gym that I run is unashamedly strength biased. And what that means is we prioritize strength as a fitness quality. And by that, think about endurance or which might belong in, say, running or boot camps, or flexibility, which, would be something you would associate with yoga practice. Other qualities that we would label under fitness would be things like agility, which you might see in field sport, power, rugby, things like that. Okay, so strength for us, and without getting too sciencey geeky, strength is where most other fitness qualities actually stem off of. So you can't have power unless you have strength, for example, because power is strength applied quickly. You can't have agility, which is the ability to change direction quickly, like on a sports field, without a strength base, and so on and so on. So for that reason, strength's very important. For some of the reasons I talked about on Tuesday, strength tends to lead to muscle, which is very important for quality of life, improved metabolism. It can help you manage your body composition, okay, as in having more muscle, less fat, and it's a buffer against things like injury, illness, serious illness, and aging ultimately, right? And again, on Tuesday, we talked about falls and something called sarcopenia, which is unfortunately almost a natural consequence of getting older, but it doesn't have to be, again, if we buffer that with muscle, which is in turn built through strength training, right? Ultimately, though, it's just about a better quality of life. If you are stronger, there's a saying out there that strong people are harder to kill and more useful in general, which is pretty spot on, right? Who are you going to call when you need to move house? Who are you going to call when you need help in the garden? And so on and so on. When you have a flat tire to change, all right? Strength is very important. I really enjoy getting outdoors and engaging in endurance type sports, but they are an artificial construct, right? If you think about anything that could sort of go wrong in life that required some sort of physicality, it's probably strength that is needed, all right? Not endurance, not flexibility. It's usually being strong is the thing that's going to be helpful. Okay, so if you want to improve your quality of life, if you want to improve your independence, and if you want to improve your performance in anything, whether it's sport or life, strength's going to help with that. Okay. Now, the way we come at strength is we think of it as we want it to be functional, we want it to be full body, and we want it to be fairly heavy. Okay? So I'm going to explain those topics. Functional it's a real buzzword in this industry, and I've sort of been through it all over the years, and for a while there it really got overdone, and you probably you may have even found yourself doing it yourself, but if you look into a gym now, you'll still see people standing on a wobble board doing a cable exercise with one arm and a banded exercise with the other arm while their eyes are closed, standing on one foot. And that's it's a little bit too far. We're getting a little bit overly functional in that regard. But it's simply stuff that resembles real life demands. Okay. And one example I use is if we went back 10,000 years and we were a group of cave people sitting around the fire, and I got to my feet and I started doing this, you would think I was perhaps performing some ancient rain dance or something, right? It doesn't look very normal. Whereas if I stood up and I squatted back down again, and I stood up and I squatted back down again, perhaps I'm just working the kinks out of my legs, right? But it would look perfectly natural for a group of people hanging out around the fire, all right? But this or this or this, those are all very artificial kind of movements. It's sort of rare that we need to do those in real life. So you can actually identify them even without a lot of knowledge in exercise, what looks normal or functional and what doesn't. Another way to think about it, though, is often if we picked a compound movement over an isolation one, that would often tick the box pretty accurately. Now, what that means simply is that compound is lots of joints working. So again, a squat, your ankle, your knee, and your hip joint are all working, right? Whereas a seated leg extension, all right, is only working the knee, all right? So one joint versus three joints, compound versus isolation. If we work more joints, it's more functional, which also means it's more real world, more practical, and generally more results. Okay. Now, it's just important. It's not to say that I'm saying you should never do isolation movements. They've got great, they have great application to rehab. Certainly, people say who are coming back, come back from injury or are perhaps elderly. That can be very helpful, but generally we're trying to trend towards those compound movements. Okay. Another way we think about this is large loads, long distances quickly. Okay. So if it ticks at least two of those boxes, it's probably going to be a very helpful functional movement. So an example of that could be, well, let's start with an example of not. The bicep curl, right? And I'm a guy, I like my bicep curls, but it's a relatively small load, right? It's moved a relatively short distance. Okay, it doesn't go very far, doesn't travel very far. And that kind of movement, it's hard to move that load quite fast, right? So it doesn't tick any of the boxes. Whereas a pull-up, right, which is an exercise that also works the biceps, it's a large load, my own body. It's moving a much longer distance than the bicep curl, right? It's not that fast, unless if you've seen CrossFit, there's kipping variations where you're a bit more ballistic, but I'm still ticking 2 out of those 3 boxes at least. Okay, so a much more functional movement, right? So that's another way to think about it, and that sort of delves into some of the physics stuff, which was the thing that actually really opened my mind to this type of training way back. It was a very simple formula: power equals work divided by time, right? And so that simply means that you do more work in less time, you're producing more power. Okay, and power is basically a stand-in for fitness, right? Your capacity, right? What's your wattage? How much output can you create? Okay. So generally, that can be adjusted 2 ways, right? You can do more work, or you can do the same work in less time, moving a little quicker. All right. So that second piece, full body. I spoke briefly about this on Tuesday, just through lack of knowledge, through the impact of media, social media, magazines, and the fact that most people who are into strength training started out as being into bodybuilding. We had this trickle down of these body part split training. And so it's not uncommon to see someone with relatively little experience going into the gym on Monday and working their chest, and then going back into the gym on Tuesday and working their biceps, and then into the gym on Wednesday to work their left inner calf muscle. All right, and that's what that means is there's a very small amount of stimulus. All right, because when you're working these small muscle groups, and only these small muscle groups, the overall impact of that workout is very low. So something that I recommend is that a full body workout is the best option for anyone from beginner right up to even sort of middle intermediate. I've been doing this thing for a couple of decades, and I'm still doing full body workouts at the moment. I've gone sort of back to them. So, they're always good. If you were going to do a body part split, often no more than, say, upper lower split, like upper body on one day, lower on another day, or push pull is another way to think about it. So that's another one I quite like. So all the push muscles on one day, so I would squat and bench press, and then on a pull day I would deadlift and pull up. All right, so splitting the body into pushing and pulling. But generally, full body is going to tick those boxes. And when we break down the body into the human movement patterns, there's really only 4 main things that we do. We squat down, we bend over, we push things away from ourselves, and we pull them towards ourselves. Okay. On top of that, we've got our gait patterns, so our running and jumping. We throw, and one that I call bracing, which is the core stuff. Okay, so whether you're doing some kind of sit-up movement, or whether you're bracing your abs so that you can carry something. Okay, so squat, bend, push, pull are the 4 main ones, and then the other one that I like to think about is bracing, but could also be known as core. So covering those 4 and then looking at the 5th one in each of your workouts is an easy way to know that you're doing something that's going to be of benefit to you. Free weights, much like the compound versus isolation, it's not absolutely necessary. Doesn't mean you're going to get a bad workout if you're using machines, but generally free weights allow us to work a little bit harder. Okay, so if you don't have experience with them, of course, engage someone to help you with that, or perhaps start experimenting yourself. If you mostly do machine-based exercise, you could try one exercise that is free weights in each of your workouts, and just start exploring that. But don't think of free weights as being an intimidating option. Often when I say free weights, most people immediately think of this big heavy barbell. All right. And again, very common in my space, in the CrossFit space, that barbells are sort of all the rage. Now, the barbell is just the most efficient and well-engineered way to apply the most load. All right. So it can be considered a pretty advanced tool. It doesn't mean it can't be used at a beginner level as well. But remember that there's medicine balls, there's sandbags, there's power bags, we've got kettlebells, we've got dumbbells. I use a lot of backpack loaded stuff during the COVID lockdowns, books into a backpack to create a load. So there's lots of other ways to create free weights than just the barbell, and explore them all, because that makes things more interesting. But certainly most people, I find, are a little less intimidated, if that is the case with training, that if you started on dumbbells and kettlebells and medicine balls, you can start to build up a bit more confidence with your technique and build a base level of strength before you progress to a barbell. But don't neglect body weight training as well. That's using your own body weight for resistance. That still counts as free weights in a sense, because you're still you're not restricted by machine-based arms and levers. So gymnastics progressions, and again, don't be daunted by that word gymnastics. That really is just code for body weight. A push-up is gymnastics, a sit-up is gymnastics. But there's a ton of progressions that you can explore on there. And often, again, COVID or travel, or if you're working out at home, body weight can be the first place you start, right? If you don't have any equipment. So you've got your sit-ups and your squats and your lunges and your push-ups and your table rows and your plank holds. You can do a lot with that. I'm a big fan of sort of animal kind of movements. So crawling around is really good for a full body workout. Mobility style flows. You've probably stumbled across a bit of that if you follow anything like this online. That's very popular right now, and it's a great way to use your body for not only resistance, but to create more mobility. Okay, next. Oh, I'm frozen. That's great. 1 second. 1 second, guys. We've got a little bit of a technical issue. My screen is jammed up. Oh, there we go. Okay.
You got it. Perfect.
We're back. Fairly heavy. Now, again, there's another one that I saw way back in the day and still see, is that people are a little bit worried about strength training because they think it involves using these weights that are too heavy. All right, it's a common criticism. But if I could be a little bit cheeky about it to start with, right? If the weights were too heavy, you wouldn't be able to lift them. So by definition, we're not lifting weights that are too heavy. We might be lifting heavy weights, but they're certainly not too heavy. And they only need to be heavy for you. All right. So fairly heavy, hence the title. Fairly heavy is all we need. And we follow the progression principle, which is really the most basic and first recognized principle of strength training, which is that as your body adapts, you just add a little more weight or a little more duration, which could be more reps, or more intensity to make continued progress, right? Our bodies are adaptation machines. They are built to recognize stress and change so that you can deal with it. Okay, so by all means, start very, very conservative, but it seems crazy, but it's frustrating for me as a coach sometimes to go into gyms and see people who I can tell are making exercise a daily part of their life, but are perhaps still doing the same reps and sets and weights and even exercises that they did 5-10 years ago. It's become a bit of a routine, and they're going through the motions. And the problem with going through the motions is your body's no longer getting any stimulus. So always trying to gradually increase what you did the last time is really the key to progressive strength training. Okay, and I put something there, the double progression principle, and that's again a fantastic way to make very subtle increases, often so small you don't even realize anything's changing. But that way you can keep on top of your technique and your confidence with this movement. So what that simply is, and you'll see an example at the end here, is we started a certain rep scheme. and then we add reps each time. So rather than adding load, you stay with the load that you're comfortable with, but you try and do one more rep than you did last week. And then the next week you do another rep again, and the next week you do another rep. And then at a certain point, we go back to the starting reps, we increase the load a little bit, right? And then we continue on. All right. So double correction. We increase the reps, then we increase the weight. Right. And that allows us to not be always thinking about adding weight, above all else, because it's not always the answer. And unfortunately, we can't make linear progression forever. Otherwise, we'd be 90 years old and lifting 500 kilos. So often slower progress is the answer. Okay. More weight is certainly not the answer. As I said, you can add reps. Couple of key points in there: tension and tempo. So I said tension and tempo versus tonnage. Don't just think about adding weight. You create more tension by slowing the repetition down and creating a longer tempo. Right? So tempo is a term for how long the repetition takes to perform. So moving a given weight slower will make it feel heavier. Right? And now this is not just some woo-woo kind of thing. This is a technique that actually bodybuilders have been using for years. And often it's a criticism that is levied against them, saying that bodybuilders are all show and no go, meaning they look really strong, but they're not that strong. And it's true for some of them because they've used this technique of tempo, slower reps with lower weight, and they've got all the stimulus that they need. What that does mean, though, right, you certainly are decreasing your risk of injury. And you are maintaining, if you find this stuff a little bit daunting, then you get to stick with a weight and an exercise that you're comfortable with for a little bit longer. It's a hard one for the blokes to wrap their heads around. And I'm picking on the guys. We tend to be the ones with the egos where we care only about the weight on the bar. Right? But again, as I said, it's simply impossible. This is a concept, I think, that we often shy away from, but it's so obvious when we think about it. We can't get stronger forever. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. At some point, you will be the strongest you've ever been. So if the only thing you care about in the gym is how much weight you can lift, there's going to come a time, and I'm there already, where it's just no longer going up. And so you have to start thinking about other ways to make your weight training challenging. Because ultimately what we're really trying to do, and this might sound a little bit sad, we're trying to get weaker slower. Right? Remember I talked about sarcopenia, where our muscles waste away as we age. Right? Now we can offset that by weight training, but ultimately what we're really trying to do is just to delay aging. Right? But it is going to happen. If you didn't realize it until now, you're going to die someday. But let's just go out with a bang and strong and muscly while we do it. All right? So we are using these techniques like tension, like tempo, manipulating sets and reps rather than just thinking about how many kilos is on the bar. Changing the exercises up regularly can be another good way to do that, because there's always a fresh start, as opposed to, again, picking on the blokes in a general way, always like, what's your bench? How much can you bench press? How much can you leg press? Sticking to those same old tired exercises is generally a recipe for plateau and stalling out on your progress. All right. Failure, not an option. And this is another one that I talk about with a lot of people, is this feeling that strength training has to be this crazy, well, here's the picture. You see the picture. You don't have to look like that to have had an effective workout. And it's been proven only fairly recently in science that training failure is not needed. Okay, it's not needed for progress. What you need is, coming back to my Tuesday talk, you need consistency. All right, so also known as frequency. So you'll get more results from your strength training, from your fitness training in general, by doing it more often. Okay, even if it's a smaller amount. So you could train for less time, but do it more times per week. Or to put it another way, if I had 2 hours available to train, doing that 1 2-hour session on Monday is not going to be as effective as breaking it up into 4 30-minute sessions. Right? And that example probably can help you really see that. By the end of that 2-hour session, right, I'd be absolutely pooped. The last half was probably pointless because I was already too tired. Whereas I broke it up into 4 30-minute sessions, I'd stay fresh, I keep my focus. That's also going to, for some of you slightly more advanced people, that would prevent injury risk because I would be on the ball. So frequency is more important. And the other thing to think about is volume, which I think I actually mentioned in the last slide. So you can do more as you progress, but you don't need to necessarily train to that intense level of failure. So one thing we talk about is a concept known as RPE, which is a rating of perceived exertion. So it's basically giving the set effort a score out of 10. So if you trained and at the end of that set, I said out of 10, how hard was that? And you said somewhere between a 7 or a 9, right? That's probably the sweet spot. Okay, 7 if you're new to it, 9 if you were a bit more experienced with weight training. Okay. And another often used technique is RIR, which is reps in reserve. Okay, I think this one's a little tougher to get instinctively, but with practice, it's basically saying at the end of the set, how many more reps could you have done? So if I did a set of 10, and at the end of it, I thought, you know what, I probably could have got 2 more. All right, that's an RIR of 2. But then again, it means I've stayed away from failure. I had 2 more reps that I possibly could have done. Okay, so generally an RIR of between 1, again, if you're a bit more experienced now, it's the lower side, like having 1 left is pretty advanced, up to having about 4 left in that set for someone who's a bit newer to it. It means that you've done, a good effort, somewhere in that 3/4 to 80-85% effort. That's the sweet spot. Okay. Again, the beauty of this means not that I'm saying you shouldn't warm up, but it means generally less warm up needed, less sort of prep, less mental focus, less stress about the work that you're going to do. Or again, discomfort's nothing wrong with that, but it is less discomfort training to that point versus this sort of screaming failure, as Blair is demonstrating for me on the photo there. All right, training like that every day is exhausting, and it's really cool, I think. As someone who's not afraid of some hard work, but I think it's really cool that I don't have to do that on a day-to-day basis to make progress. All right, so wrapping up, this is an example of what a workout might look like. Okay. As I said back at the start of this talk, if I know now, and this is the crazy thing, right? I read a book that said this exact piece of advice to me, and of course I ignored it. And now I look back going, spot on, which was to pick a full body workout and then an alternate full body workout and just move between the two. So have 2 workouts and just alternate between those 2 workouts for 2 years using the double progression principle. Okay, so try to add a couple more reps, then add a bit more weight, go back to the beginning, repeat, and just do that over and over for 2 straight years. Now, of course, this is the problem. Us humans, we get bored and we start looking for the next shiny object that's going to give us those quick results. But unfortunately, it turns out now, after 20, 30 years of weight training, that this would have been a fantastic way to have started out. So here I am trying to impress upon you that simple is better. And what do we got here? We've got our 4 main patterns and then our bracing exercise. So I've put a couple of options there. If you don't know the movements, of course, they'll be fairly easy to look up or check in with the coach. We have a goblet squat or a lunge. All right, so that squat pattern, 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps. Okay, so just jumping ahead, that double progression principle, right? So you would do 3 sets of 8, and then next week you'd try and do 3 sets of 9. Week after that, 3 sets of 10, and so on until you got to 12, and then come back to 8, but add some weight this time, some more weight. Do your 3 sets of 8 again. Following week, 9 reps, 10 reps, and so on and so on. And you could keep going with that for, as I said, for potentially years without skipping a beat, and always managing to do a little bit more than last time. The moment things start trailing off, perhaps you try a new exercise, but the same pattern of that double progression is the way to ensure you keep making progress. So exercise B, we've got a bent row or a lat pull down. So that's your pull exercises, pulling to you from both directions. We've got a Romanian deadlift or a Russian swing. That's our hinge movement or our bending movement. And then finally our push movement, push up, classic push up. There's a gymnastics progression or a dumbbell overhead press. All right, pressing in that vertical plane. And then finally a bracing movement. So we've got one for body weight, that's a side plank. And then we've got a loaded one, a suitcase carry, which is picking up a heavy kettlebell or dumbbell in one hand and taking a stroll with that. Okay, so see below that, sets of 8 reps at about that RPE 7 to 9. Right, when you can get 12 reps, increase the weight and repeat from 8 reps again. Okay, as I said before that, you could also think about adding extra sets. So that would be going from 3 sets of everything to 4 sets of everything to 5 sets of everything. That does have limited return though, because of course it's going to increase the time of your workout. And that added volume is a demand that, takes time to recover from. So it's something that you would think about down the track, play around with that rep range first. Another advanced technique is to decrease the reps. Okay, so we're moving further into that strength zone, because as the reps go down, the load naturally can come up, right? And as we get heavier, it does get more advanced. But it's certainly a way to keep making progress. And then finally, as I said, you could increase your training frequency. So if you're training twice a week with weights, you might try 3 times and then 4. And generally at the top end, 4 or 5 is the most that anyone should really be training with weights. If you're playing sport or doing other activities, then 2 to 3 tends to be the sweet spot if you're alternating that to something else. All right. So that is me. If we had any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. We don't have any questions, everyone. I just got a couple round of applauses and thanks for sharing. So that's always good. If we do get any questions, I'll let you know. I'll fire them your way. So feel free, guys, if you're watching this on the replay, to let us know any questions you have. But that was all encompassing. Thank you so much, Darren. Thanks for your time.
Again, my pleasure.
Great. Well, have a great weekend over there. And you guys enjoy the rest of the Be Well week. And we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. But have fun training. Thanks, Darren. Thanks so much.